Well, hello and welcome to the Collectors. Today we're in for an exciting tugboat ride, and we're going to look at some really early outboard motors from Detroit and Toledo. 100 years old, the tug's 100 years old. My guest today is Charles Schmidt. His friends call him Charlie, and we're really glad he's here to talk to us about his boat and his outboard motors. Thanks for watching the Collectors. Hello and welcome to the Collectors. Today we've got a unique opportunity. We're going to be looking at rowboat motors, or outboard motors, over 100 years old. And a bonus, we're going to get to ride on a 1924 tugboat, actually from the New York Harbor originally, but now it's here in Michigan. My guest today, Charles Schmidt, his friends call him Charlie, is going to tell us all about his collection. And we're excited. We've got a real old motor here. How did you get started collecting outboard motors?
I was given an outboard motor by a good friend's father. And he said, if you can get it running, you can have it.
That's a good idea.
I put it on the back of my boat, rowed home, got the thing going, and I was with that motor for several years. It was an old water witch, quite frankly.
Water witch.
Water witch, yes.
And so from there, you like to work on it. You'd used it, and it was valuable, and you used it for fishing and so on. And then you found another one somewhere.
Well, I worked at a marina on the Clinton River.
Okay.
And that's kind of where I got started fooling around and collecting outboard motors. I worked on them mechanically.
Okay.
And helped them out in the shop and learned quite a bit at that point. And I was always on the watch for something I didn't have, right? Sure,
something unique. This one here is one of the oldest ones we have here, I think, right? The one you standing
next to. This is a 1908.
Wow.
It's right in the era with Waterman. This is probably one of the 3 or 4 that exist in the country today.
Okay.
That are known to exist. This particular motor, a Walnut, is made by the Walnut Machine and Foundry Company in Toledo, Ohio.
What a great name.
It's unique in that there are some innovations in it that were developed with this company, and the tip-up part of an outboard motor, taking it out of the water, is what they developed.
They were the first ones to patent it, probably.
They were the first ones to patent it. And
can you show us how it works? Yeah.
You unscrew the nut down here and tip the motor up, and it's out of the water.
And that's 1908, and that's the first time.
It's 1908, and that's the first time that they used that on outboard motors, yes. The other unique thing about this particular motor, they built 3 motors, Sprite and a Bertray. And they had separate locations for manufacture, but they all came out of Toledo, Ohio.
Okay.
I did quite a bit of research on this particular motor when I found it with the people that were involved with the foundry company, and I contacted 2 or 3 people with the same name, and they were related to the people that owned the foundry, but they had no information on it whatsoever.
Okay.
Since this particular motor was about the time that Waterman developed his motor in Detroit with a motorcycle engine, they were threatened with lawsuits if they didn't pull all these motors back off the market, because he felt that they were infringing on his patents.
Okay.
It's kind of interesting. They drew back, as near as I can tell, 24 or 25 of them, and this particular one slipped through. This motor I had known about for some time, had tracked it with the owner of it, kept records on it, and finally saw him one day in a parking lot in St. Clair Shores, asked him if he wanted to sell it. He said, come and see me, we'll take care of you.
So like any collector, you hit him at the right time, and you paid attention and you followed it as long as you could.
Absolutely.
And when you mentioned Waterman, that's made Detroit on 2nd Avenue. And originally they made gambling machines?
No, Waterman, I think, is the originator of the outboard motor. I mean, there's a lot of arguments going on today of whether Curtis motorcycles were involved in it and who was involved with it. Evinrude Alto might have been involved with it. It kind of depends on who you talk to and what you read.
Yeah, a lot of this information is hearsay.
I think it was developed right here in Detroit by Cameron Waterman.
Okay. And what's this little beauty?
Well, that's kind of an interesting motor in that it's a 1960 power head. The power head is 1916 Evinrude rowboat motor.
Top half of the motor, okay.
Correct. And it has a 1950 lower unit on it.
Okay.
So it's been adapted to the 1916 power head, and this thing runs like a charm. I mean, it's amazing how well this thing runs.
I'll be darned. And that shows you, that's some ingenuity. You know, a person can figure out how to do this. Detroit's full of people who can figure out how to make things. We're known for that, right?
Oh, there's just no doubt about it.
Somebody figured this out. And then we got, what's the story on this
one?
Well,
those last two motors that we have there, Lockwood.
I love that name, Lockwood Ash. Or this one's Lockwood Ace.
Just Lockwood, yeah.
Okay.
That's a couple of brothers over in Jackson, Michigan that put those motors out. A very, very interesting company because they did a lot of things. They had a car dealership and they sold hardware and they did manufacturing. They did a whole bunch of stuff. A rather large company. Lockwood, a lot of people don't know, Lockwood was purchased by the Evinrude Alto people, and that became OMC, Outboard Motor Corporation.
Oh.
Okay, that became part of it
So
at that time.
Okay, they got together.
The Ace was one of the largest selling motors that they had in 32, 33, and then it kind of teetered off. And
I would imagine not a lot of outboard motors were sold, or as many during the Depression. That's an option, you know, to have an outboard motor. What horsepower is this one?
that's about 4 horsepower, 4 or 5 horsepower.
Just 4 horsepower.
This is kind of unique because there's no skag on this motor either, okay? And this was considered one of the faster motors of the day.
Oh, I see, okay.
The skag is missing off this motor. It has a little different propeller system on it, and they think that's what gained the extra mile per hour with it.
And I know all these companies had racing teams or built racing motors for racing, because that was race on the weekend and sell on Monday, right? I don't know if they all had them, but many of them had racing.
Lockwood was into a lot of racing.
They were, okay.
And probably from the Ace, they went into more racing motors and started developing the racing motors. Their Lockwood Chief is a very, very heavy racing engine.
I'll be darned.
High horsepower.
Now we got one from the early 30s. This was a real cute little motor. This is a Detroit motor.
Yes, it is. That's also, both of these motors here, the Lockwood, are considered to be Detroit engines, although this was made in Jackson.
Okay.
Kale was one of the largest manufacturers in the state of Michigan, and we at one time had some 38 or 39 manufacturing facilities doing outboard motors here in the state of Michigan.
Isn't that something? Amazing.
And today there are none. Kale was one of the big ones at that time. This particular motor, a 79, is considered one of their largest sellers. It has an extended tiller on it, which was an extra at that time. It also sold for $79. That was the advertising key on it. I mean, and this was kind of a secondary business for them because they were making slot machines and doing a lot of other manufacturing in regard to.
That's where I got confused. It was Kale that was making slot machines.
Yeah.
And then they could easily transform into making these castings and getting in the outboard motor business.
I don't know whether or not a lot of people know that they were making slot machines. I think probably a lot of that was done behind closed doors.
Oh, okay. So maybe they were gumball machines or some other simple gambling tool for money. Well, this is a great motor. Where'd you find this one?
This particular motor also was not this particular motor, but Kale people were also very heavy in racing. They're one of the people that developed a tractor drive, which is one that you turn the lower unit around and rather than push, it pulls.
Okay.
Which is a very interesting segment of the racing, in early racing in the 30s.
And I think it was Mercury that had no, it was Chris Craft that had a front propeller and both. A tractor and a rear, but it wasn't very successful.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I think Chris Craft probably did a lot of stuff that
maybe didn't get on the market.
Didn't get on the market. I don't believe that was ever put on the market, but this particular tractor drive that Kale had was very popular with racers. Very, very popular.
I know you have several, maybe 100 outboard motors.
Oh, I've got probably 125 or 30.
Okay.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
I'm sure the IRS isn't watching, so we don't care.
No.
So what, Charlie, at some point, you've been collecting a long time. At some point, what do you do with your collection, do you think?
I don't know. It's a sad
difficult.
situation with our collecting today, with outboard collecting, because we can't get younger people into it.
Right.
It really is a sad situation because a lot of younger people were never, ever involved with any of these motors. It's almost a situation where if it doesn't have a keyboard
Yeah.
and play music, it isn't worth a darn.
And I also think that people collect stuff from their childhood or teens or early life that it brings back memories. So they collect, whether it's Pokemon or DVD or not DVDs. I guess they're not quite that old enough yet, but 8-track players and music like that. Different people collect something from their past that they find interesting. So now, guys, we've seen some outboard motors, but the real treat today is going to be a ride on a 100-year-old tugboat out of New York Harbor that Charlie has here. He's had for how many years, Charlie?
Oh, I've had it 6 or 8 or, yeah, about 6 years.
About 6 years. And the boat is called Leroy Brown. It's named after the very first African-American pilot that was shot down in the Korean War.
Jesse Leroy Brown. There was
Jesse
just a
Leroy
movie
Brown.
made about it here recently.
Oh, there was, okay.
I can't remember what the name of it was, but it was quite popular. But it was the first black Navy pilot that flew a jet in Korea, and he crash landed, and his wingman crash landed with him. But by the time they got him out, he had deceased. But
That's too bad, yeah. So something I've always wanted to say is about a boat is due to reasons of specific advantage, I'm taking this boat to the Bungo Straits. Do you remember that line?
No.
Run silent, run deep. So Charlie, you got this fabulous boat. I'm curious, how did you find it and how did you get it here in Michigan?
Well, after I retired, I worked in a family business that was owned by my cousin, Michigan Marine Salvage.
Oh, marine salvage, okay.
And this was the boat that the tugboat that we used. We also had construction barges. This pushed construction barges and pushed fireworks barges. We did fireworks for a lot of the communities along the waterfront, the Ford Estate, St. Clair Shores, New Baltimore, and so on.
And that's kind of an interesting thing. The boat's all steel.
Right.
So it's pretty tough to burn, obviously.
It won't burn. That thing won't burn.
And you would haul barges for all the special fireworks.
We had a particular barge that had a lot of sand on it, and the fireworks companies could just plant their, whatever the hell they call that thing, the muzzle or the thing they pack it in.
They shoot, yep.
And they didn't have to do a lot of work on it, but we would push the barge to wherever their activity was or wherever they had been contracted to do fireworks.
And of course, it was used for the salvage company to do salvage on Lake St. Clair and Detroit River.
It did. Not Detroit River. Most of our
okay.
stuff was out in Lake St. Clair.
Okay.
Also pushed construction barges. It was in all of the tugboat races up until a few years ago in Detroit, and won its class consistently over a long period of time.
When you'd have a tugboat race on the Detroit River, in your class, how many boats would there be in the race?
15.
15 boats. And you
Yeah.
race from where to where?
Race from the Ambassador Bridge up to Diab Park.
I'll be darned.
It was a madhouse.
I'll bet.
It was a real madhouse.
I'll bet. That sounds pretty fun and exciting. Everybody's blowing their horns. There's probably fireboats with fire guns going
The
off.
Detroit fireboat was coming down the Detroit side of the river, you know,
Okay.
with all their pumps going, and you know.
okay.
But there sometimes that we would get out ahead, but there was some bigger tugs that were behind us, and you know, you knew that this 100-foot tug, you had to pass you up before you got to Diab Park, so it got pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'll bet. It made you nervous. Well, I don't want to waste any more time talking about it. Let's get on this boat and take a ride.
Very good.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
How much of this IP instrumentation is original? Is this upgraded?
It's all original.
It's all original.
When the engine went in, this had to be with it.
Oh, okay. What's the horsepower on these?
185 horsepower.
185 horse. Okay. Well, I really hate to end this show. We've had a great time here at Charlie Schmidt's home on the Clinton River, running on a 100-year-old tugboat, talking about his outboard motors. And we've really been appreciative of Charlie's hospitality. Thank you, Charlie. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. And I'm going to leave you with a question. You can contact me at bctv, the collectors, at gmail.com. I want the answer to who was the actor, what was the movie that said, she's low in the water and underpowered, but I love her.